Ladies and gentlemen, it is time for another NFL playoff picture update. We're getting down to it. There's only 2 games left. There's only going to be one more update after this week. We do have a little bit of clarity regarding the upper seeds in each of these conferences, so let's get into it. You can take a look. The Baltimore Ravens, very impressive win against San Francisco. They're holding on to that number 1 overall seed, but they are facing the number 2 overall seed, the Miami Dolphins, this week. They're sitting -1.5. That is a heavyweight battle, and there are a lot of implications in that game. Who's going to get that very coveted first round bye? Baltimore, I do think, will win that game, but it's going to be really close. If Miami wins it, they go ahead with the tiebreaker, so we'll see. You do have Kansas City still sitting at that number 3 seed, even after the disappointing loss. Kansas City very lucky. Their division, the AFC West, which normally is very good, this year it's not good, so they still hold the division lead. They're 9-6. They would be taking on Buffalo. That is not a fun matchup for Kansas City. If you are the number 2, the number 3 seed, even the number 4 seed, you want to avoid the Buffalo Bills in the playoffs for sure. You do have Jacksonville still leading the AFC South, even though Houston also has an 8-7 record. Houston is completely out of the playoffs right now. They just lost to the Browns, but they're getting CJ Stroud back. They've got a big opportunity over the next 2 weeks. We'll talk about their remaining schedule. Right now, the 5v4 matchup is Cleveland, who's sitting at 10-5. They're in a very tough division. You know, you're looking at a Baltimore team very likely to win that division, so the Browns will have to start on the road in the playoffs with Joe Flacco and how well he's played. If you are the Browns, ideally you would want to face Jacksonville over Kansas City or Miami for sure, so that would set up good for them. They're clearly in the playoffs right now, the only 5-loss wild card team in the AFC. You do have Buffalo winning a few straight games. They're looking good. They've got an easier remaining schedule. They're facing the Patriots. They're feeling good. Very likely to make the playoffs, possibly as a 6 or a 7 seed, but likely a 6 seed at this point. Unless the Browns lose one of these final 2 games, they could move up to a 5 seed, possibly face either Houston or Jacksonville, whichever team wins the AFC South. And you do have Indianapolis right now, complete mess when it comes to the amount of teams in the NFL that are 8-7. Via tiebreakers, they would be in the playoffs as the final seed there, the number 7 seed on the road at Miami at this point. Looking at the NFC, you do have San Francisco still, even after the bad loss, sitting 11-4 with that first round bye. They've got the tiebreaker over Philadelphia. They beat them badly in Lincoln Financial Field. Philadelphia coming off that win against the Giants, extremely easy remaining schedule. So you have to be optimistic if you are the Eagles. If the 49ers slip up somewhere, even though you don't have that tiebreaker, if you win your final 2 games and the 49ers lose one, you will get that first round bye. You do also have Detroit hanging on with maybe a chance, also at 11-4, right now the number 3 seed, although Detroit is heavy underdogs on the road in Dallas. That's going to be a Saturday night game coming up. They're 11-4. Maybe they have a chance at the number 1 overall seed, but I highly doubt it. I think they're locked in right now to the 3 seed based on their remaining strength of schedule. And then you do have that terrible division, the NFC South, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers sitting at 8-7. They've been winning. Baker Mayfield's been playing great. They would host a playoff game, although you do have a few other teams possibly in the mix in that division, most notably New Orleans. You do have Dallas sitting as the number 5 seed. I would expect this to be the matchup for sure right now when you look at it on paper. Dallas at Tampa Bay, maybe Dallas at New Orleans, one of those type of matchups, but Dallas most assuredly will be a 5 seed. Mainly based off of the fact that, you know, Philadelphia has an easy remaining schedule. And if Philadelphia is going to win that division, Dallas is going to get bumped down to the number 1 wild card, kind of like the Browns with Baltimore. You do have the Rams sitting at 8-7. They hold tiebreaker, so they would be the 6th seed right now. They've got winnable matchups on the road coming up in East Rutherford to take on the Giants. And then the 7th seed, also at 8-7, is Seattle. Seattle faces Pittsburgh at home. They're 3.5-point favorites. So the matchups would be Seattle at Philadelphia, the Rams traveling to Detroit. That's a potential upset right there. The Rams, that's a good matchup for them. Going to a dome against a Detroit team that has a suspect defense. And then Dallas at Tampa Bay. We would expect Dallas to win that game very easily. Now let's expand it. Let's really look at the wild card situation. I talked about the top, but you can see the Browns, they've got 5 losses. They're 2 games in front of Indianapolis in terms of making the playoffs. They seem almost like a lock at this point, facing the Jets as 7-point favorites. They need to win this game to get in. Even if they lose it, they'll still likely be in the playoffs, but the Browns are trying to get that 5 seed to avoid both Kansas City and Miami in the first round. Buffalo very likely to be in as well. So it comes down to that last spot in the AFC. You do have Indianapolis with a home game against Las Vegas. Las Vegas right now the number 11 seed at 7-8. That's only a 3-point spread. So if Vegas wins that, steals the tiebreaker from Indianapolis, they could move in front of them just like that. You also have Houston lurking, facing Tennessee, possibly still thinking about winning the division, but in the event Indianapolis loses to Las Vegas, they could possibly jump in to be that number 7 seed. You also have Pittsburgh sitting at 8-7, coming off a win with Mason Rudolph. They're on the road. It's a winnable game, but they're 3.5-point underdogs. They're the 9 seed. Cincinnati, I don't think is going to make it. They're at Kansas City. That's a very tough game. Jake Browning, his little Linsanity run seems to be over. And then you do have Denver right now sitting at 7-8. Winnable game for Denver versus the Chargers, versus Easton Stick, possibly moving to 8-8, maybe moving to, really be in the hunt as an 8 or a 9 seed going into the final weekend. We will see. Moving on to the NFC, just looking on down, you can see right now the 6-7 seeds, both at 8-7. You've got a bunch of teams at 7-8, including Atlanta, who's still in the mix for the NFC South. I don't think they're going to win that. I think they're going to lose to Chicago and they're going to be done. But New Orleans at Tampa Bay, that's the huge game we're watching. Can New Orleans win that and possibly catapult themselves ahead of Tampa Bay? Depending, we will see. We'll have to take a look at their next week game after this week, and then you can take a look at some of the other teams. Minnesota sitting at 7-8, Green Bay at 7-8. They face each other in a Sunday night matchup, so that should work itself out. If you're either Minnesota or Green Bay, certainly you want the Rams to lose. You want Seattle to somehow lose. Those are the two teams you're rooting against. And then you also do kind of have Chicago. I think Chicago's out of it at this point. Yeah, Chicago's pretty much done at 6-9. Moving on to the ever-important NFL draft order, and congratulations to the Chicago Bears. It really looks like they possibly can secure the number 1 spot with a loss here. If Carolina loses their game this upcoming week, they will secure, or they should secure, that number 1 overall pick based on strength of schedule, because even if Arizona ends up losing out and Carolina wins one of these games, you can take a look at Carolina's strength of schedule. It's significantly worse, and whoever has the worst strength of schedule wins the tiebreaker. So Carolina, even if they had the same record as Arizona, they would still likely get the number 1 overall pick. Arizona right now looking possibly at that number 2 overall pick, maybe Marvin Harrison Jr. if they want to stick with Kyler Murray. You do have Washington. How about Washington and the tank job that they've done, losers of 6 straight, looking at a number 3 overall pick? Would they consider a quarterback? I think they might. And it really comes down to the situation with Sam Howell really struggling towards the end of the year and having a top 3 pick. You do have New England with the brutal win, the bad win. They drop out of the top 3. They're at number 4 after that win. Really not good there for them, trying to get a franchise quarterback, Drake May, Caleb Williams, but who knows, maybe Jaden Daniels ends up being better than both. The Giants in a pretty good position after winning those 3 games inexplicably in the middle of the regular season, sitting at 5-10, rooting against both Washington and New England to close the season. Possibly the Giants. Can they jump inside of the top 3 or 4? We will see. And the Chargers are sitting right there as well at the number 6 overall pick, along with Tennessee, who very likely will lose out as well. And you can see Chicago dropping all the way back down to number 8. They've won some games recently with Justin Fields. They have the number 1 pick right now and the number 8 pick. And then the Jets at number 9 with Atlanta, who's still in the mix for their division. So is New Orleans at number 10, 11, and Green Bay, who's still in the mix for the wild card at number 12. Now, moving on to the toughest remaining schedules, you can see Washington very likely to lose out. They face San Francisco and Dallas. Outside of Dallas randomly resting their players or something happening, you would expect Washington to secure a top 3 overall pick, unless, I don't know, Washington might end up losing the tiebreaker to New England because they face 2 really tough opponents, which is going to improve their strength of schedule. And if New England loses out against worse opponents, they could actually drop. It's funny, Washington has the number 3 pick right now. Even if they lose these next 2 games, because they're such hard opponents, their strength of schedule will improve. And if New England loses out, New England, even though they have the same record, and right now New England has a worse pick, because of the way the tiebreakers work, New England could move up to number 3 still. You do have Pittsburgh with very tough remaining schedule, with a very tough remaining schedule. We'll see if Baltimore rests any of their players if they wrap up the number 1 seed. They probably will. So that could be good news for Pittsburgh fighting for a wild card if Baltimore rests everyone in week number 18. You do have Arizona with also a very tough schedule. So Arizona seems to be locked into that number 2 overall pick right now based on them having only 3 wins and a few of the teams below them having 4 wins. The Giants seem to be locked into a top 5 pick. Very tough remaining schedule with the Rams fighting for the playoffs, the Eagles fighting for a number 1 seed. Cincinnati, I think, is done. I don't think they're making the playoffs. Baltimore with a tough schedule, but it's a situation where if they win this week, you would think they would lock down that number 1 overall seed and then be able to rest everyone against Pittsburgh either way. And then taking a look at the easiest remaining schedules, Jacksonville. So that's big news for Houston. Houston cannot like that right now. Not in control of that tiebreaker. And you can see Jacksonville, I believe Houston and Jacksonville split their season series 1-1. So it comes to conference record. Jacksonville facing Carolina and Tennessee to end out the season. Very, very easy for them. They're sitting 6.5-point favorites. Philadelphia possibly gunning for that number 1 overall seed over San Francisco. If you are Philadelphia, you've got 2 basically guaranteed wins there, the Giants and Arizona. And you're looking at San Francisco and you're seeing, maybe a loss to the Rams. They also face Washington. San Francisco sitting massive favorites against Washington. We will see Tampa Bay also with a very easy, Tampa Bay because they faced Carolina that last week. So that's huge for Tampa Bay. If they beat New Orleans, you would think it's a lock. They're going to win that division with their schedule in week 18 facing Carolina. Although who knows, it's the NFL. They might lose to Carolina. Seattle with kind of a relatively easy remaining schedule. You can see Denver even with 2 easy games remaining both in division. But guys, that is going to do it for my Week 17 NFL playoff picture update. Make sure you're following me on X. Link to that's always in the description.